Homemaking Through the Decades. The 1910s. The 1910s opened with a world already beginning to change. Electricity slowly entered more homes. Telephones connected families and neighbors in new ways. Automobiles became more common on roads once dominated by horses and wagons. Factories expanded, cities grew, and modern conveniences quietly began reshaping daily life. And yet, inside most homes, the rhythms of homemaking remained deeply familiar. The homemaker still rose before dawn. The stove still needed tending. Breakfast still needed preparing. Laundry still waited. Children still needed care. Gardens still supplied much of the family's food. The homemaker of the 1910s stood between two worlds. Part of her life still resembled the 19th century. Part of it was moving steadily into the modern age. And then came war. When World War I began reshaping the world, the American homemaker suddenly found herself connected to national survival in ways previous generations had never experienced. The government encouraged women to conserve food, reduce waste, save fats, stretch ingredients, and plant gardens to support the war effort. Homemakers responded immediately. Wheatless Mondays and Wednesdays became common in many homes. Meatless meals appeared regularly. Sugar became precious. Nothing could be wasted. The homemaker adapted quickly. White flour was replaced with oat, rye, barley, and cornmeal flours whenever possible. Soup pots simmered longer. Beans replaced expensive cuts of meat. Leftovers became entirely new meals rather than being discarded. The wartime kitchen became a place of creativity and discipline. And yet, despite shortages and uncertainty, fresh bread cooling on the table still mattered. Soup simmering quietly on the stove still mattered. A pie cooling near an open window still mattered, because ordinary comforts become even more important during difficult times. Many women now managed households almost entirely alone, while husbands, sons, and brothers worked long hours or served overseas. And still, daily life continued. Children attended school, laundry appeared washed and folded, meals somehow arrived at the supper table, gardens remained planted, bills were carefully managed. The homemaker carried enormous responsibility during these years. Perhaps nowhere was her emotional strength seen more clearly than in the letters she wrote overseas. These letters often carried ordinary life within them. Descriptions of gardens, stories about children, neighborhood news, recipes, funny little household mishaps. The homemaker understood something deeply important. The men overseas needed reassurance that home still existed waiting for them, that ordinary life continued, that the kitchen still smelled like fresh bread, that children still laughed in the yard, that family routines still carried on despite the world's uncertainty. She did not always write about fear. Instead, she preserved the feeling of home inside those envelopes. Victory gardens became one of the defining images of the decade. Backyards transformed into rows of vegetables. Families planted beans, potatoes, cabbage, carrots, onions, tomatoes, and herbs. Vacant lots became community gardens. Gardening was no longer viewed as merely practical. It became patriotic. Every vegetable grown at home helped reduce pressure on the national food supply. Women who had quietly gardened for years suddenly found themselves teaching neighbors how to preserve food, rotate crops, and maximize harvests. Women's clubs expanded rapidly during this decade as well. Church groups, community organizations, sewing circles, temperance groups, civic clubs. Women gathered not only for companionship but also for action. They organized food drives, prepared supplies for soldiers, knitted socks and blankets, shared recipes and rationing advice, supported struggling families. The homemaker's skills now carried public importance because homemaking required planning, budgeting, nutrition, organization, adaptability, leadership. The homemaker had always known this. Now society was beginning to recognize it too. The sounds of the 1910s home reflected both comfort and uncertainty. The clicking of knitting needles beside evening lamplight, the whistle of kettles on the stove, the rustling of newspaper pages while families searched for war updates, children practicing piano in parlors, the scrape of kitchen chairs across worn wooden floors. And despite everything happening in the wider world, ordinary homemaking still continued. Bread still needed baking. Laundry still waited. Children still tracked mud across freshly scrubbed floors. Even during war, homemaking remained wonderfully ordinary in so many ways. and humor survived too. One homemaker attempting wartime oat bread discovered her loaf became so heavy her husband joked it could stop enemy artillery. Another proudly planted a victory garden only to discover she had grown enough zucchini to feed half the county. One distracted homemaker discussing Red Cross knitting accidentally burned a perfect iron-shaped hole through her husband's best trousers. Even during difficult years, kitchens still found ways to humble people. These stories matter because they remind us these women were not simply historical figures. They were real people, tired sometimes, overwhelmed sometimes, funny, creative, capable, resilient. Then came the influenza pandemic of 1918. Entire households became ill at once. Hospitals overflowed. Fear spread rapidly from town to town. And once again, the homemaker stood at the center of survival. She brewed broth for the sick, opened windows for fresh air despite winter cold, applied cool cloths to burning foreheads, managed children while caring for ill family members, stayed awake through long nights listening for coughing from upstairs bedrooms, sometimes while ill herself. The emotional burden of these years cannot be overstated, and still, homemakers continued to move forward because families depended on them. The kitchen remained the emotional center of the home throughout all of it. Warm soup beside sick beds, tea served quietly during difficult conversations, toast warming near the stove, simple meals shared together after exhausting days. Food became comfort, routine became comfort. The ordinary rhythm of home itself became comfort. The homemaker of the 1910s also witnessed changing expectations for women themselves. The suffrage movement grew stronger throughout the decade. Women organized meetings, marches, campaigns, and speeches demanding the right to vote. And although not every homemaker participated publicly, many quietly understood the deeper truth behind the movement. Women had already proven their competence countless times. They managed homes, budgets, children, food supplies, gardens, communities, social networks. The war years only made that competence impossible to ignore. By the close of the decade, women finally gained the right to vote in the United States. And though history often focuses on political leaders and public speeches, ordinary homemakers helped shape that moment too, through endurance, through organization, through community work, through the countless invisible responsibilities they had carried successfully for years. The homemaker of the 1910s emerged from the decade transformed. She had survived war, rationing, pandemic, economic uncertainty, rapid social change, and through all of it, she had continued doing what homemakers always do, creating warmth, creating order, creating stability, creating home. The tools of homemaking would continue changing dramatically in the decades ahead. Electricity would spread further. Appliances would become more common. Modern conveniences would slowly reshape the American household. But the deeper heart of homemaking remained remarkably unchanged. People still needed comfort after difficult days and meaningful routines, still needed care. And the homemaker of the 1910s understood something timeless. A home does not become warm and welcoming accidentally. It is built slowly through repeated acts of care. Fresh bread cooling near the window, soup simmering quietly through the afternoon, laundry folded late at night after children are asleep, gardens planted with hope each spring, despite uncertainty in the world beyond the fence line. These things may appear ordinary, yet over time they shape the emotional memory of entire generations. Children raised in warm homes carry those memories into adulthood. Recipes survive, traditions survive, stories survive, ways of caring survive, still gathered around meals, still longed for peaceful homes and meaningful routines, still needed care. And the homemaker of the 1910s understood something timeless. A home does not become warm and welcoming accidentally. It is built slowly through repeated acts of care, fresh bread cooling near the window, soup simmering quietly through the afternoon, laundry folded late at night after children are asleep, gardens planted with hope each spring, despite uncertainty in the world beyond the fence line. These things may appear ordinary, yet over time they shape the emotional memory of entire generations. Children raised in warm homes carry those memories into adulthood. Recipes survive, traditions survive, stories survive, ways of caring survive. And though the world would modernize rapidly after the 1910s, many people would continue searching for exactly the kinds of homes these women quietly tried to create every single day. Warm, steady, comforting, meaningful. Homes where ordinary life felt cared for. The homemaker of the 1910s may never have considered herself historically important. She would likely have shrugged modestly and insisted she was simply doing what needed to be done, keeping the family fed, keeping the household running, keeping children safe, keeping hope alive during uncertain years. But her story matters deeply because she helped hold families together during one of the most difficult and transformative decades of the modern age. And she did it not through dramatic speeches or public recognition, but through thousands of ordinary acts of care repeated faithfully day after day. The kitchen light still glowed softly against evening darkness. Bread still baked, children still laughed, laundry still moved in the breeze. Women still gathered around tables, sewing, knitting, preserving, and sharing stories together. And beneath all the uncertainty of the 1910s, the homemaker continued quietly building home.